I want to read for you one verse. Your assignment for this week is to read 2 Corinthians chapter 8 every day, but I'm reading for you one verse out of 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 7, and it reads like this. What do you have that God has not given you? And if all you have is from God, why act as though you are so great and as though you have accomplished something on your own? One more time, listen to that verse. What do you have that God has not given you? And if all you have is from God, why act as though you are so great and as though you have accomplished something on your own? Bow with me in prayer, please. Father, I pray that in these next few minutes we would be centered on your word and on the responsibilities that are ours as your children to obey your word. I trust that folks will understand this message and understand the spirit in which it is given. In the name of the living Lord Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. You've heard it said before that money is dangerous. And when we begin to talk about money, it's a dangerous subject inside the church especially. But when we read 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10, it says, for the love of money is the first step toward all kinds of evil. The old King James says the love of money is the root of all evil. And I know that when we read that verse, most of us say, well, yeah, that's true for other people. Not true for me because I don't really have any money. You don't have to have money to love it. Rich or poor, you can be in that category where you're covetous to get money and bring it to yourself and hang on to it and do your thing. Money always promises to be your friend and many times turns out to be a traitor. If you don't have it, you're desperate to get it. If you do have it, somehow it seems you always want more, because when money is security, never is enough. All we need to do is think about those people we read about constantly. They win that big lottery that you've always thought. I've had so many people say to me, you know, Bufe, if I just win the lottery, Northwest would never have any problems again. You know what is almost universally true of the people that tell me that? I know they don't give for beans with what they've got now. I know what people give in this church. I make it my business to know. I don't want to have a board of deacons made up of men that are not givers of money to this ministry. I don't want them dictating how we're going to spend money on ministry. I make it my business to go. I think I'm absolutely inside my right. I see Jesus standing in the temple watching what people put into the coffers there and discussing the fact that the little widow came along and she gave more than anybody because she gave all that she had. And when we get into this subject here, and if you're a visitor today, let me say to you, we don't preach about money much here. We're one of the few churches in the country that puts boxes by the door. We don't pass an offering plate, haven't for many, many years, and God has sustained the work because I'm trying to get people to mature enough to understand what belongs to God and what belongs to them. Just give God what belongs to Him. And if this congregation had even 50% of the people in it tithing, giving God 10% of what they bring home, we'd have money. We'd be standing knee deep in money. Everybody thinks we've got deep pockets in this church. The truth is, 80% of the financial load is carried by 20% of this congregation. And I want to kind of open your mind up a little bit today, because the leadership in this church has brought us to a place of preparing to present to you a stewardship opportunity called Discover the Joy. That word stewardship is interesting. I got my big dictionary out and looked it up. Stewardship is the management of someone else's resources and property. The management of someone else's. You look at here. What do you have that God hasn't given you? Whatever you've got has come from God. That's His. And if all you have is from God, why act as though you're so great and as though you've accomplished this on your own? You see, the Lord only asks this, that we respond to what He has done. And He's done 4 things that I just want to touch on. First of all, He has created an absolutely incredible universe and given us a planet that is really something else. You realize that when you read in the book of Genesis concerning creation, as God would create something, He'd say, that's good. And then he created something else. He'd say, that's good. And then when he got all through, he stepped back and says he looked at everything he created and he said, that is very good. The old Hebrew scholars tell us absolutely perfect, couldn't be any better, and that is an absolutely dynamic way to say it is wonderful. That is what God gave us. The beauty of this world, the raw materials of this world, and the brain power that he gave to us and put those together and produce all kinds of things out of the raw materials. I remember a number of years ago, John Osborne was in this church, and he is still here, but at that time, he had just built a Madeira glass company, and my dad and I went up there to take a look at it. And I didn't know how you made glass. I'm not a good chemist. I'm a good social person. I don't understand math and a lot of that other stuff. But we went up there and looked at that, and I said, John, how does all this happen? And he looked out his window and down. He said, you see those railroad cars full of sand? We just take that sand and heat it up, and it turns into glass. And we got down there, and here are these bottles. They're just dropping out like crazy, and there used to be sand out there in a railroad car. And that just blows me away to figure out that somebody, and I wonder who the first guy was that says, I think I'll cook up a batch of sand today and see what happens. Instead of cream of wheat, I'm going to have sand this morning, and he wound up with glass. You know, just one of those interesting things. The raw materials God has given us. And despite the ecological problems in this world, this is still an incredible place. And our stewardship begins here. This is a gift that God has given us individually. Think about your physical abilities. The things that God has, you see, you can't change a lot of things. If you could change things, I'd be 8 inches taller and I wouldn't be so fat. See, if I were the same weight and 8 inches taller, but I can't change it by thinking about it. Think about your mental abilities. Do you realize that you have a God-given IQ that you really can't change? You can use it, you can implement it, but you can't change it. And to understand you may be sharper and smarter than somebody else, that's strictly a gift from God. It is nothing for you to boast about. When you see us born in the USA, I'm going to tell you, I've traveled this world, folks. I don't want to live anywhere else. Yeah, we got problems, but I don't live anywhere else except in this country and in this valley. I love this valley. It's been a wonderful place to raise our children. It's a dynamite place. And God is, you see, we are receivers from God of this work of creation. Secondly, God has given us a commandment. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 3 says, you are to have no other gods before me. God warns us about rival loyalties. God knew he would create a planet so gorgeous with so many opportunities and so many beautiful people that we would easily find ourselves in a rival loyalty against God. We get to the place to where we worship the creature and the creation more than the creator. And it's happening everywhere with people that are in love with the creation and the creatures, but they have no time for God. God gave a warning about that to his people in Deuteronomy chapter 8. Listen to this. He's talking to his people, the children of Israel. They have come through that long desert, 40 years. They're about to enter into the promised land. And he's told them how great it is. And it's going to be a good land of brooks and pools and gushing springs and valleys and hills and wheat and barley, grapevines and fig trees and pomegranates and olives and honey. Sounds like the San Joaquin Valley to me. It's a land where food is plentiful. And God says, but that's the time to be careful. Beware that in your plenty you don't forget the Lord your God and begin to disobey him. For when you become full and prosperous and have built fine homes to live in, and when your flocks and herds have become very large and your silver and gold have multiplied, that's the time to watch out that you don't become proud and forget the Lord your God who brought you out of your slavery in the land of Egypt. Beware you don't forget God. He did all of the things he did for you. The manna he gave you and the rock he brought water from, he did it all so that you would never feel that it was your own power and might that met your needs. And he says, don't forget about the Lord your God and worship other gods instead. If you do, you will certainly perish. Strong warning from the Lord. That thing is still in effect. that we have a responsibility to worship the Creator and never to be boastful. That passage I read out of Jeremiah that says you're going to boast in anything, you boast in the fact that you truly know me and understand I'm the Lord of justice and of righteousness, whose love is steadfast, and that I love to be this way. That's the one truth we're to boast in. Now, my friend Fred Smith taught me years ago a great statement. He says that giving is the drain plug for the greed that is in our souls. Giving is the drain plug for the greed that is in our souls. All of us have greed in our souls. We all want to get and get and get. God says you need to learn how to give away, and giving is the thing that drains the greed right out of our souls. Third thing that God gave us. Gave us creation, gave us a commandment to protect us, and then he gave us a cross. When you read 2 Corinthians chapter 8 this week, you'll come to this 9th verse, and he's talking in this whole chapter about giving. But in verse 9, he says, you know how full of love and kindness our Lord Jesus was. Though he was so very rich, yet to help you he became so very poor, so that by being poor he could make you rich. God's gift of salvation, absolutely incredible. At the end of the 9th chapter, it says, thank God for his Son, his gift, too wonderful for words. Don't let anybody ever tell you that they took Jesus' life from him. It was a gift from God, and he came and laid it down freely because of his tremendous love for us. And consequently, he has brought us salvation. You ever stop to think about where you would be today if it weren't for the forgiveness of God in your own life? For the love of God that has brought you to himself and has given you all the wonderful forgiveness from the guilt and the sin in your life, that has brought the healing emotionally and physically into your life that you have needed. You think about the gifts of the Spirit. I love old Bill McGlasson, because one of his great witnessing tools when he's talking to someone is to say to them, you know, I can tell you 9 things that you can have for free that you can never buy anywhere. Can you? And old Bill starts Galatians 5:22. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are the gifts of God to us. Freely given because his Son came and went to the cross. He said, nobody takes my life from me. I freely lay it down of myself, because of his incredible, incredible love for us. And his love compels us to respond in an attitude of giving. Fourthly, God gives us a call to commitment. In Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, he said, I ask of you, I beg of you, I plead with you, give God your body. Now, why does he say that? Because that's the only thing we've really got. You know that? We can't see our spirit. We can see our body. And when we think about our body, we think about all of the things that surround our body. We think about the clothes. We think about the food. We think about the house. It's our being. Give God your whole being. You say, that's a little radical, isn't it? Man, it's the only way to live. For listen, with the eyes of faith, we can see that God is not trying to take away from us that which we need. God wants to give us all we need in a way that will not hurt us. He wants us to learn to possess things in a way so that they do not possess us. I tell you again, money is dangerous because it is so sly and so sneaky in how it overcomes us. And for someone to stand and say, when we receive the gifts of life from God's hands and give them back to him, we hold them together with God. When Greg and Lynn came to dedicate David this morning, he is a gift from God, and they come to publicly present him back to the Lord and to hold him together with God. That takes the anxiety out of that situation. You see, when we try to hang on to things all by ourselves, we always do so with an anxious grasp. And that leads me into some personal things I want to say today. Some things I need to say because we're heading into a major campaign. I've been thinking about this for over 6 months. I have thought a great deal. I have planned a great deal. I came home last night about 9 o'clock. I left the game at halftime. Came home about 9 o'clock to finish putting everything down. And when I finished at 1:15, I was so excited I couldn't go to sleep. All I could think about coming down here and sharing with you this morning these things from the Word and these things I need to share with you personally. I think you want honesty from this pulpit. And as I thought about the Discover the Joy campaign, as I thought about leading people into a place to where they can discover the great joy of giving to God real money, I began to think of all the reasons why that Roberta and I should not give. You see, we give liberally to Northwest Church. Consistently, the past several years, we are the 4th or 5th largest givers in this church every year. When my check comes, the first check that I write is for 26% of my take-home pay goes right back to Northwest Church. In addition to that, we support Youth for Christ, we support World Vision, we support the Bulldog Foundation, we support a lot of other things out there in this community that come out of that gift part of our income. But 26% of it goes to this church regularly and has for years. And consequently, I could say to myself, I think we're given plenty. If everybody else got on the wagon, even with a tithe, we'd be in tall cotton. We wouldn't have a problem here. Perhaps we need to think about not joining the campaign and try to encourage everybody else to. Because it doesn't seem fair for us to give more when many give little or nothing to the ongoing ministry of this church. You would be amazed how many folks want every service from this church that we have to offer and never return in any way that portion that God has asked them to give to His work. And so I hatched up a little plan. I thought, Lord, I've got a great idea. I'll tell you what. Why don't we just begin to give 10% to the general fund, and then I'll take that other 16% and I'll give it to Discover the Joy. That way it doesn't cost me any more money, but I'm still giving more, way more than the average person in this church does. Won't that work? No, that won't work, Bufe. That's not fair. You've been led by God to give 26% of your take-home pay to this church. Don't start trying to divvy it up now, take it out of one pocket and put it in the other. There's no gain in that. There's no sacrifice. You're going to talk to your people about not equal gift, but equal sacrifice. Then you got to be dead honest with them about who you are and where you're going with what you and Roberta are doing. And then I thought, I work hard. I work like mad. And I knew that Discover the Joy is going to take more of my time. Letters I have to write, newsletters to prepare, items to check through, people to encourage. I knew all of that was coming. And I thought, maybe I can just count the fact that my extra work, maybe God will say, that's your investment in Discover the Joy. Last week when I finished the 11 o'clock service, somebody came through that door and handed me a message, said, call Roberta. She comes to 8 o'clock, goes to Logos class, and goes home and gets dinner ready. She happens to be in this hour today because we're involved with the Linkowskis and some other events at 1 o'clock today and at their home this afternoon. But that last week she was home. And the message I got when I called her was, call Carol Madriano because Benji was shot at 6:30 this morning at Ashland and West in his Unocal station, and she needs to talk to you. He's dead. And so when I finished work here, before I went home for dinner, I called Carol and I went to her house and sat with her and her sons and some friends, and we began to prepare our way for what we had to do in connection with Benji's death. I've known him since he was a high school kid. 18 years ago, he and Carol asked me to come to the Highlands Inn in Carmel and do their wedding, and we went and did that wedding. But this is another story to sit with him through the grief. And I went out on Tuesday morning to Clovis to bury a dear friend of mine, 95-year-old Blanche Weaver, incredible lady who's prayed for me every day for the last 30 years. I feel something missing in that I know someone needs to pick up the slack left there, because beautiful Blanche isn't on this earth to pray for me anymore. But I went to do that service, and that was a great celebration. But I left there to go to the boys' funeral home because Carol had called and said, will you please come and help at the viewing of Benji's body. Help me and my sons and Benji's parents. Johnny and Norma had only one child, and that was Benji. And they'd poured their lives into Benji. And as I went to Boyce and saw them sit there, not being able to go into that room to view that body and to allow the reality of Benji's death that came so violently and so quickly, I finally had to almost pick Norma up, and she's not a little petite lady, to say, come on, Norma, you've got to make this trip. And to assist her into that room with Johnny behind her to help them go through the grieving process. And then came the word from my friend Angela Raimondi, who called the office on Tuesday and said, my 13-year-old daughter is dead from cancer. Can I come and see you? I haven't seen Angelo in some time, but he came and we spent time, and he said, I've done the best I can. I've taken her to St. Jude's for 6 months in Memphis, Tennessee. I've had her to Stanford. I finally took her to Mexico, and there was no way anyone could help her, and she's died, and we've cremated her and brought her body back. Can you do a service? And so Thursday morning at 11 o'clock, it was at the Clovis Cemetery, backed up against Herndon Boulevard without a PA system, and 300 people in a crowd for Benji's service. Marty Akery was there to help me, thank God. And trying to communicate with that crowd, and some of them really not interested in Benji's death. I've never had a funeral in all of my life where there were 4 stretch limousines, 1 for the family and 3 for other people, because this was an occasion for a big party. And they weren't there to hear the word of God. They were there to go through the motions of listening to things, but they wanted to get on with it as soon as that thing was over. That's the kind of work week that I run. Week after week after week. And I said, Lord, I'll do discover the joy, and isn't that enough? And once again, it was no. You see, I understand this, that I have responsibilities financially to take care of my wife. We handle our money well. We don't have any car payments. Church supplies me a car. Hers is a 1984 El Camino. It's paid for and has been. I've said to her 2 or 3 times, baby, do you want a new car? No, this one's fine. We don't owe anything on our charge cards. Anything we charge, we pay off at the end of the month. We have found that the only thing we need to owe on is our home, and I recently refinanced that with a 15-year loan, figuring I'm going to stick around a while and get those better interest rates. We know how to handle money well. We're generous, but we handle it well. And maybe laying out these reasons, you say, those are all the reasons why I'm not going to get in on Discover the Joy. But then I began to think more about it. What are the reasons I ought to give? Number 1 is I'm the leader in this place. And a part of my leadership style, I will not ask you to do anything that I am unwilling to do. I'll not ask you to be a soul winner without being a soul winner, and I am. I will not ask you to witness for Christ without being a witness for Christ. I was at a wedding last night at 6 o'clock way out in the east end of this valley. And the guy at whose home the wedding was taking place, he was just allowing these folks to come in. And he's a big Bulldog fan, and he was trying to put the pressure on me to stay at the reception rather than go to the game, because he couldn't go because he was the host. And I'd only met him on Friday night at the rehearsal. And I said to him when he was putting one final press on, I said, Eddie, I'll make you a deal. I'll stay here for the reception. You show up the next 4 Sundays at Northwest Church. He said, you better go to the game. You better go. That's a witness. He had to make a decision. I don't ask you to study without being a man that studies tremendously, constantly. I don't have time to read novels. I don't have time to read all the stuff. And I love to read, but I've got to pour into my mind the things of God from the Word of God and from the array of books that come my way to give me strength in my own soul. I don't ask you to pray without being a man of prayer. And there's no way in the world that I can ask you to consider a sacrificial gift over the next 3 years to this campaign without us being involved in a sacrificial gift. And I began to think about God's faithfulness to me and to us as a family. We have taken some very heavy hits in the 25 years that we've been at this place. And you've stood by us. You've prayed for us. You've loved us. You haven't run away and left us. When I had to stand before you and tell you that our son Randy was dying of AIDS, you didn't run away. Believe me, I know this. Without a strong family, without a strong church family, I would not still be upright. I had a man in my office recently, he said, I'm angry with you because you've managed to come through hideous trials and trust God to carry you through. And I said, friend, I've got a great host of people that love me and pray for me and care about me and my family and walk with us and don't run away and leave us. I think about you all the time. I ask God to make me equal to the task of giving leadership to this church in every area so that the ministry gets done to the glory of God. And when I look at that, I think, no way that we cannot make what for us is a major pledge to give over and above that 26% for the next 3 years. We've talked about it a lot. In fact, Roberta and I have probably talked about money more in the last 30 days to 45 days because I handle the money. And about our giving. And about what we need to do in relation to this campaign. We've planned that over the next 3 years, we will give, in addition to what we already give, $25,000 to the Discover the Joy campaign because I believe in the ministry of this church. I believe our young people are worth it to build a family life center that's going to expand some opportunities for our adult classes and all, to expand this chapel area out here so that we can get more work done because we've got more space, and to renovate this thing over here that needs incredible amount of help. And I don't say that for any other reason except to let you know where we are. You say, where's it going to come from? I don't know. It's going to come from sacrifices, part of it. You know, we go out and eat with an entertainment book, you know? You get 2 for 1. I'm not too proud to do that. I go to Reuben's Monday through Thursday. You can go to Reuben's 5 to 5:15. You can get 2 great dinners for 1 price. That's the place to be. We don't spend a lot of money on vacation. We haven't been anywhere on vacation this calendar year. And we're not going until November. And in November, we're going to Pacific Grove because Bud and Madeline give us the use of their timeshare for 4 days. It's Pacific Grove, and we'll have a great time. We heavily invest in this place. And it's going to take some more sacrifice to make that pledge come true. But I also know that God knows how to surprise us. God knows how to do things beyond anything we can dream of. And I believe that He will. You may go away from here today, say it isn't fair for him to stand up there and do that. I don't know any other way to be the leader in this place. What am I asking of you? I'm asking, number one, that you pray like mad about Discover the Joy and about your own financial situation. It is time some of you decided to get honest with God about how you've been robbing Him constantly. You do everything for yourself, and you do a little picayune thing for God. And believe me, one day if you'll listen to me, one day you'll stand before God and come and find me and say, thank you. You had enough guts to not back down from an issue that is all over the pages of this book. You were strong and you were to the point and you gave leadership and you weren't telling us to do one thing while you were doing something else. Pray about how you're handling God's money, because some of you are consistently robbing from the Lord. Secondly, I want you to think about the things that God has done in creation and in His commandment and in His cross and in His call to commitment. I want you to think about those 4 things. And I want you to have the courage to say, God, what do you want me to do? You families get together and say, Lord, what do you want us to do? Is it worth this investment here? Or shall we just pass? I believe God has brought us to this opportunity to lead this church into the 21st century with strength and with power and with facilities to get a job done. But if we're going to make $2.5 million, we all need to come to a place of a sacrificial investment in this work of God. Remember, this sermon is to the Northwest folks, and if you're new here, I knew I was going to preach this when all your family is here, Greg and Lynn, but if you're new in this place, we're not about money. That's not who we are. We're about bringing people to Jesus. We talk very, very seldom. I can't remember the last time I preached a sermon about giving. But I know this, it's time to face into the need. And I trust that if you misunderstand and if you go out and are upset with me, I trust you'll pray for me and just tell God to fix me. I'm all screwed up. But I don't think I am, okay? So I may not change, all right? But I just let you know this. This is a great place. God has done and is doing an incredible work. The absolute best days of this work are ahead of us. And you'll find that when you learn to give God what belongs to Him. There is incredible joy in giving. I know that. My past experience tells me that. And my future experience, it's only going to verify that you can't outgive God. Stand with me. Let's pray. Father, accept our thanks this morning for the clearness of your word, for the opportunity that we have to invest in the eternal work of God. And sometimes that investment goes into bricks and mortar. Sometimes it goes into the support of the workers that God has raised up. Right now we're in that place where we need to pray seriously, Lord, what do you want me to do? And so I pray that we would allow the blessed Holy Spirit to overwhelm us, not in a moment of emotion, but in a moment of truth, to consider your creation, your commandment, the cross, and the call to commitment. And to say, Lord, what do you want me to do? Bless us as we go. In the name of the risen Christ, we ask it. Amen. Thank you. God bless you.